Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today from wherever you're coming in around the world. Very excited for our conversation today, talking about some interesting ways to engage remote learners and help support them in their learning journey. Before we get started, a couple of things. Danielle made some of these announcements, but I know we had some people join. So we are recording this webinar, and we will send that recording out a day or so afterwards, so you can watch again or share it with anybody who wasn't able to be here. We also really encourage participation from the audience. So if you have questions, comments, anything along the way, please post them in the chat. You will notice when you open the chat that it will default to posting just to the hosts and panelists. We'll encourage you to change that setting to post to everybody so we can all learn from each other's comments and questions. And then we'll try to incorporate those throughout the session today. We would also, speaking of the chat, love to know who's joining us. So if you have a second, just drop your name, title, where you're joining us from, what institution you're with or organization in that chat. And if there is anything specific that you were hoping to get out of the conversation today, please let us know, because we can make sure that we cover that and touch on that as part of the process. So number one, I'm super excited to welcome Audrey Dempsey to joining us today. She is the Business eLearning Manager for University College Dublin. Michael Smurfit, Graduate Business School. Did I say that correctly?
You did indeed, yes.
So Audrey, thank you for being here all the way from Dublin, where it's a little bit later in the afternoon/evening for you.
Right.
I am Katie Kapler, so I am the co-founder and CEO of Inscribe, and we are supporting and hosting this webinar today. I'll tell you just a minute about a little bit about Inscribe in case you're not familiar. But really the focus of the conversation today is around Audrey and her team and the amazing work that they've been doing with their students in the business school. And then also joining us is Danielle Bonner, who is our Senior Director of Sales and Marketing Operations. She's going to keep us on track. She's going to be keeping an eye on the chat. And if you've joined one of our webinars before, you know she is fully empowered to interrupt us as we go and make sure that we are, again, weaving in any questions or comments that you have along the way. Anything you want us to touch on immediately, Danielle?
We have lots of familiar faces or names in the chat, so hi to all of our partners. But I don't see anything right off the bat, no.
Okay, wonderful. So again, if you are not familiar with Inscribe, we're a virtual community platform. So we partner with institutions, primarily in higher education, post-secondary learning, to create digital spaces where students can connect with each other to ask questions, get advice, find support in a very flexible, on-demand way. So we work primarily with non-traditional students, including online learners, and really help replicate for them the serendipitous interactions, the networking, the connection that traditional students who are on campus get by default every day. We really believe that this is a core component of what makes a student successful and a major contributor to their learning experience, and we don't want these students to miss out on that. We are very excited about our partnership with UC Dublin, because this is our first partner that we really launched with in Europe. So that was a great learning experience, partly just going through the GDPR and European requirements. Fortunately, we already take student data privacy very seriously, so that wasn't a huge leap for us, but some paperwork to fill out. But moreover, just learning about some of the similarities and differences of students over there, and in particular, the commonality for online learners, kind of needing a space where they could connect with each other that's very flexible and wanting that opportunity to build relationships and connections with their peers, but maybe not always knowing how or when or where to do that. So we're excited to tell that story here today. And I think that same concept will resonate with all of our attendees today. And I'm really curious as we go through this conversation to hear you reflect on whether you're experiencing some of the same challenges or opportunities with your learners that you're supporting at your institution. With that said, Audrey, why don't you tell us a little bit about the university and a little bit of background in case there's some folks that aren't as familiar with it.
Sure. So as you touched upon, Katie, so the University College Dublin, we're based in Ireland. We have around 35,000 students. We have some sites in Singapore, in China, and in Malaysia as well. But for the College of Business, then we have a separate site down in a place called Blackrock, and that's our Smurfit School of Business, which is our postgraduate college, where we have around 1,800 students. So we are doing MSCs, and we have an MBA program part-time and full-time as well. So yeah, so that's our we have 50% of our population is Irish, and then the other 50% is international students who come and study with us on site.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And so a very diverse set of learners,
Yes.
both on the campus and probably learning online around the world.
Yeah.
So that can present some really interesting opportunities for connection, and also maybe some challenges in thinking about and how you're supporting those individuals. Is there anything you want to touch on here?
I suppose, yeah, obviously very proud of the fact that we're the globally triple accredited business school. We are especially this year focused on diversifying our offerings, whereas before we were very traditional college, but now we are looking to create more online opportunities for us. So we launched our first online program last year, which is a very generalized MSc in management. So we did have a part-time offering of that, but it was decided actually to make it part-time and online. And that kind of is in tune with why we went with Inscribe as well. So we were very concerned that with our part-time students who were used to meeting each other and coming on site and feeling part of the graduate school once every month for 2-3 days every month, we were really wanted to fill that gap where those students wouldn't be able to connect with each other as easily. And we also wanted to make sure that we could not oversee those connections, but definitely make sure that connections were being made and encourage students and make sure that they could find information as they needed and as quickly as possible. So that's why we had a look at Inscribe and really liked the product. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I love that you were being so proactive with these programs. Recognize sometimes schools will be reactive. They'll launch the online program and then after the fact realize, oh dear, we should have created some of these opportunities. So I love that you were being very proactive, thinking about what the needs of these students are and how you really replicate that experience for them.
Yeah.
And I know you touched on some of this already, but tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that led you to talking to us and ultimately making the decision to adopt.
So I guess everybody will understand a lot of these. So number one, we are facing the same challenges worldwide, I think, around accommodation and the ability for students to come really for 3 days if they weren't from Dublin, to come for 3 days and stay, let's say, in a hotel for those 3 days and study on campus during those 3 days and attend classes. That was becoming less easy for them. I'll give you one example. I think in the first week, which would be an important onboarding time, I think Garth Brooks was playing in Dublin, and the average price of a ticket, or sorry, of a hotel, I should say, was around €500, which is a lot of money.
Wow.
So we were running into all of these problems. So hence the online offering. And then the other element was to really, since COVID, we knew that students weren't coming to campus for as long. So they would come for their classes, but they weren't staying around as much. And we believe that's because there are more students have jobs in the evening time, or they're living further away from Dublin City as well. So we are really the centre of Dublin where we're located at the moment. And there is a rental crisis in Dublin City as well at the minute. So we find students have longer commutes. So that idea of hanging around in college and creating those connections, it's not as apparent as it was before. We can visibly see those rooms are a little bit less full as well. And then the international students. So we really wanted to create a space where our students with maybe the English isn't as strong as our, English isn't their first language, or they've just arrived and they're coping with, you know, feelings of isolation. We wanted to create an environment where students could, in their own way, communicate, and maybe that's not face to face, maybe that's easier for them in a digital environment.
Yeah. First of all, who knew Garth Brooks was so big in Ireland? So like,
yeah.
but I think you're you're definitely echoing a lot of the same challenges I've heard from other institutions in terms of, you know, commute and proximity. Students don't have as much flexibility, or, you know, the impact of the cost of rent or the cost of living in some of these locations where institutions are centered prevent them from really being able to be there full time. And also this idea of helping students find individuals who they feel comfortable and connected with, and that sometimes that those populations look different for different students, and being really sensitive to that. And the science absolutely supports it. I mean, this slide speaks to that we can see when students aren't feeling connected, a significant number of them just actually cannot learn. You know, when you're thinking about the hierarchy of needs, if safety and security is not met, your ability to process information and think and learn is also greatly diminished. I know the study didn't come from you all, but have you guys seen this, or is this something that you're also thinking about?
Yeah, 100%. So that connectedness, and I'll just add something in there. A lot of the technology that we have is very linear, and it's focused on the academic modules, and it's not a program. It's very much, it's focused on a program with its academic modules. And really, from a technology point of view, it's very, very hard for two students to connect over technology unless they're in the same program or module. And we wanted to see students kind of diversify the groups that they're with, because that's also where the magic happens, isn't it? Where you have the business analytical people, you know, having the conversations with the marketing people or the HR people or whatever it is. Yeah. So we wanted to create that diversity as well. Yeah.
And no different than when you actually get to a company, right? You don't only talk to the people within your part of the organization. It's really about that cross collaboration.
Yeah.
And don't, you know, we always say to people, don't presume that you know who students want to talk to or who they're going to want to connect with, because you're probably going to be wrong. So, you know, giving them that bigger bucket to participate in, I think, is really, really important and valuable for those learners. We would love to know from the audience, you know, if you are also thinking about some of these same challenges for your online students or your students in general. Also, if there are certain strategies you've deployed that have been helpful, please let us know. And I'll ask Danielle if there's anything in the chat at this point that you would like us to touch on.
Not at this point. There was a question about the sources for the data, and I'm going to share them in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, as you think about some of the things that you're working on or challenges that you're facing, please drop them in. And again, we can circle back and talk about some of those as we go forward. Well, so you pioneered these online programs in response to some of the challenges that your students were feeling. You also recognized that the experience of online is going to be somewhat different than in person, and wanted to make sure that you were filling some of those gaps. So we got to partner, which was really exciting. So tell us a little bit about, you know, the initiative to build communities at University College Dublin, how it came about, and then we'll talk a little bit about the solution you guys put together.
Okay, so we had an opportunity. So we have a National Teaching and Learning Forum who put up around, I think it's 60 million for Irish universities who could submit for funding around several different strategic initiatives. And our one was under digital strategies mainly, but so we put ourselves forward in partnership with you, Katie, because you helped us a lot with our submission as well. And yeah, thankfully we were successful. So that allowed us to launch in September then last year. Yeah.
Awesome. And talk a little bit about some of the goals that you articulated in that application, and some of the priorities. We'll go to the
next slide. So again, it's that sense of the student's sense of belonging. And I suppose recognizing that these are Gen Z and millennial students as well, Gen Y, and we really wanted to meet them where they're at and stop doing things the way we're used to doing it, and yeah, bring some technology in there because we know our students love to communicate over other technologies. And yeah, really the enhanced experience was our main focus on that. And then, as I touched upon earlier, that idea that these to enhance those relationships and to increase that network that they have so that they can reach beyond their own programs and reach out to other students in different areas. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And then really we have a lovely LMS, but the minute I saw Inscribe, I thought that looks like something students will like to use. So
Yeah.
we all know LMS, you have to do a training course with the students in order for them to really understand and get it and know how to use it. Whereas Inscribe was very, very user friendly. We haven't had to give any student training or anything like that. It's it looks like a much nicer version of Reddit, if I'm being honest, which we're all kind of used to using anyway before they come here. But it's just
Right.
have, yeah, an element of user friendliness where the students can go in and share videos, share content, really, really easy, and have a quick discussion about it as
Yeah.
well. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because I do think it's really interesting how small changes in user experience and access can have an outsized impact on engagement. And
yeah,
so we've worked with people who have like, oh, I tried to do this in the LMS or I tried to do this with discussion boards and it never worked. But then if you just sort of shift it to a product that's really designed for that, you can see much greater levels of participation just with those few
absolutely.
small adjustments.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of your priorities.
Okay, so priorities really is building a sense of community for our students and connecting our now online students with our on-site students as well. So those face-to-face students. So that's a really big priority for us. And then on the other side of it is to try and create these community of practices within the academic kind of students. So in an ideal world, when I've got the output from the research, we'll be noting the fact that we have, as I said earlier, that data analytics students is helping the HR, students with some maybe STEM, algebra related project that they were struggling with. So that idea of everybody helping each other, and in an academic way as well. So really
Awesome.
supporting each other as peer learners. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Which again is very much speaks to what you'll be doing after you've graduated, in your actual career. So this idea of incorporating those skills into the learning process in this very organic way, I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Danielle, anything before I jump into the community design that you would like us to touch on?
There was just a comment in the chat that maybe we can address. So this attendee says, I see two sides, some students that want and need to connect and others that do not because they're too busy. They want to do classes on their own and be done with it. The challenge that this person is seeing is often they create the opportunities and students do not join in those opportunities, or they don't even look at the opportunities that are provided.
Yeah. Did you run into a little bit of that, Audrey?
Yeah, and we always will. And you know what? As I always like to say, we have the same problem with staff, when we're putting on events as well. You'll have the regulars that attend, the training or, an event or a social event. And then you have, I think it's just people, and that's just the way it is. I guess this is another way to facilitate a busy student in the sense that it's asynchronous. So maybe that student is busy and they've taken on additional modules. Maybe they're doing some extracurricular, program work. And maybe they're working in the evenings as well. So here's the time here's a tool, I should say, that they can use over weekends or in the evening times and maybe less social hours that then, when the building is open, let's say down in Smurfit. So this is kind of there to plug that type of student as well, and at least give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think, in essence, as these networks grow and students are talking to each other about it, and if they can see a benefit for themselves, then I think, the likelihood is that students will start using the tool more. Those type
Yeah.
of
And
students,
it sort of grows over time, right? As they learn to
Yeah.
trust the system, learn what's in there.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing that I thought was really interesting in one of the studies that we did was, there was a community, and let's say 20% of the community members were posting and asking questions, and then 80% never posted anything, but we could see that they were looking at stuff, which is pretty much the same that you would see with a normal community. And when we surveyed the students, the ones that were the lurkers actually reported very high responses of impact on belonging and peer connection and the value of the community, never having said anything. Because I think just seeing other people post things that you were thinking about or worrying about is very reassuring, and kind of get at some of those other things like imposter syndrome and anxiety that students can carry with them. But yeah, I think
another question.
Oh yeah, sorry, Danielle.
Yeah, no problem. It feels like we've already sort of addressed this, but I think maybe Katie, you could add in a little bit in regards to the features that Inscribe has. So this person would like to learn more about keeping students engaged and interested in coming back.
I could just speak like from a best practices and features standpoint, and then Audrey, I don't know if you have anything that any tips and tricks that you guys were using, but let me try and summarize. So I think there's a couple of things. One is, where is the community located? So you want to make sure you've integrated the community into the places students are already going, because when it's in front of them, they're obviously more likely to remember it and use it. The second is that the community has to be an active member of the space. And what I mean by that is, when things are happening in the community, it's important that the system itself is reaching out to the community members to tell them what's happening. This person needs help. This student posted a resource. And that goes through, mobile notifications or emails, so that even if you're not checking in the community all the time, you're still seeing the activity and the energy that's happening in there, and then that will draw your students back in. And then depending on the type of community that you're launching, having a few leaders in the community who are making sure that things are getting posted periodically, that they're responding to questions when they're asked, things aren't just sitting there unanswered, again, is very much part of validating the purpose and the trustworthiness of the space. So you want to build that trust with your learners and help them understand what the space is for, and then they're much more likely to use it going forward. That's general advice. We certainly partner with our institutions to there's probably many more best practices my team is thinking about right now, but I think we do a really nice job of that. But Audrey, any thoughts from your perspective?
Yeah, so we created a role called the digital community ambassador. So we assigned 30 students to that role, and it was in support of a particular tier within a global leadership program that they were working on anyway, and they were members of. So this is an additional program that students can become part of as they're studying. And it's another one of those added advantage things to have on your CV when they leave. And it puts them into kind of leadership positions, and where they can apply their skills as they're studying throughout the year. So we created 30 student roles, which we started last February, and that's where we saw those students really impact the community and increase the community. So they received training from Jeannie from Inscribe, and she really talked about the softer skill of just creating conversations and what might be interesting. And, there was a very funny conversation about, we have some pool tables in Smurfit School and some of the social areas, and there was one conversation about who's taking the chalk all the time, and it was very, very jokey. But that was like one of the more active conversations for a full week, so it was kind of nice. So you could see them bringing in, it's their community. So it was really good to actually see the students be part, run that community and be the kind of the leaders in that community. I think that made a big difference. And then the other side of it, so, you know, students love anything that is related to their assessment and getting, you know, additional assessment points. So for our online modules, to encourage engagement there, we moved from using our Brightspace, which is our LMS, that discussion forum. We have actually moved all our discussion forums over to Inscribe, and that was based on feedback we had got from the academics. They just did not like using the tool, and nor did the students. So we moved to Inscribe, and we have 3 modules. Only one of those modules had a continuous assessment of 10% only for an academic module in Inscribe. And the other 2 we didn't assign a value to. But for some reason, all 3 academic modules, sorry, I don't know why I'm beeping here, all 3 modules became extremely active. So we inbuilt opportunities after each topic was introduced, where the students were given a question or something to reflect on personally about what they learned and compared that to them in the workplace or a project they had worked on before. And that was extremely insightful, actually. And that encouraged them to come in, and they were engaged. And then while they were in there, they were responding to other communities then, because they were already in there, really.
Yeah, drawing them in. So that's so interesting. So, because we do have people who will think the only way I'm going to get students to participate is if I put a grade on it. But your experience was it didn't really change the level of interaction, whether it was graded or not.
So for the other 2, I'll be honest, because I think that way as well. And I was a little bit afraid at the end of the year, they'd be like, where's my 10% for those other 2 modules? But we had laid it out, and it was very, very obvious what they were going to be assessed on. But yeah, but it was really interesting. Awesome. And actually the feedback from the students was that it was really good to hear those personal reflections from other students around the topics that they're learning. And that's ultimately what we're trying to fix here. Is we have an 80% asynchronous delivery for an online program. So, you know, you want to hear other students on that peer learning piece. So that's why we introduced this. And actually, just from a very weird look and feel of it, I haven't done a word count yet, but I can tell you from just visually looking at it, because the tool is better laid out, and you've got more screen real estate when you're working on it, and it's just easier to use, and you're not going down through threads like in Brightspace. There was definitely much longer submissions, so much heavily worded submissions, so that was good, and they were more graphical as well. So there was more images put in for, so like we had one around data visualization as one of the courses, so it was really good to see some of those dashboards that they were looking at online and being able to draw them in and speak about them as well. So that was
very cool. Those are great suggestions and recommendations. Especially, I also like the idea of having students help moderate, because we know that can be very motivating for everybody on all sides. And Danielle, should we take any more, or should I proceed?
You know what? We have a friend that shared in the chat that they have multiple asynchronous discussion board activities along with some synchronous meetings in online social spaces. And I know that we're going to get into that in the next couple of slides. So if we could just keep moving forward, I think we'll address the conversation there.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, let's dig in. So we've talked a little about the background. I know you've already started to talk about the community itself and how you've been using it, but lay it out for us. You know, what was the infrastructure, let's say, of the communities that you put together?
So the common room matches the name of our social area down in Smurfit, which is called the common room, and that is for all Smurfit students. And then the other one is a specific, so everyone gets access to that. And then we wanted a very specific one for our MSc in Management online course. So that was to support them a little bit deeper and have our program manager in there and managing that particular community. And then within those communities, we do have some academic modules, which are kind of locked down. So they're private. What's the word? It's not a community. They're private.
Channels.
Channels, thank you. And we have them directly linked via their Brightspace modules.
Awesome.
That's
So
great.
it's very common, by the way, just for the audience to know, for institutions to have multiple communities set up to serve different purposes and different populations. So it's really easy to slice and dice them the way that you see here. And then a channel is like a subgroup within a community. So you can create public and private smaller spaces for people to talk to each other.
I think this actually goes right nicely into the next question that we have. How many groups are managed by a single person? We're looking for some best practices or recommendations on that.
Do you have the same moderators in the two communities, Audrey, or?
Yeah, like I'm a moderator, like there's very little moderating that has to take place, if I'm honest. And Jeannie always said that to me and I never really believed her, but that's
Jeannie runs our
yeah.
customer success team. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you can keep an eye on things, but really it'll be fine. And I would always think, oh, I'd say I'll be in here a lot, but actually I'm not. So you have and then I have each lecture I would assign to any academic modules, and they would want that, obviously they'd want to be in and taking a look at it. So program manager, there's one program manager and ourselves, which is two other team members in the MSc one. And then for the common room, it's just the business e-learning team at the moment, which is 4 of us. And we just keep an eye on the community and make sure everything's working appropriately. And we give it a little nudge, maybe if things are quiet, to our digital ambassadors as well, just to maybe get chatting. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad that you said that. Nobody ever believes us when we say there's
not,
you know, as much work as you think it's going to be. But so usually good to have a couple of moderators in there, just because, you know, a couple of eyes on things would be helpful. But again, the workload is really small to keep these things up and running and then continue the management of them.
And it's very
so we talked, you've mentioned Brightspace several times. This is probably a picture of how it's integrated into your student experience. You want to talk at all about this? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? LTI.
Yeah, it really is. So you can see it very much is in an iframe within the browser, or within, sorry, the LMS. So it's really easy to access. We've got a thing called single sign-on as well. So it's just one login to Brightspace, then it's LTI linked into Inscribe. So it's perfect. It very much looks and feels like the same tool, actually.
Right. And that's that concept of just getting in front of the students where they're already going. You could integrate this outside of the classroom at a little higher level, but these LMS LTI integrations work really, really well for that concept. Oops. Let me see. Okay, so let's talk about, and again, interrupt me, Danielle, if something comes up, but let's talk about, you know, some of the things that you're seeing and the behaviors that you're seeing in your community.
Yeah, so I suppose so when we introduced our GLP, so our Global Leadership Program Digital Ambassador role, that was entering into mental health areas, and actually how you recommend to support your mental health during busy exam time. So that was an interesting one. So we kept an eye on that, obviously, because, you know, wanted to make sure things would be okay in that conversation. It was okay. You know, I mean, they started talking about classical music and other music genres that I hadn't even heard of, embarrassingly enough. But so that sort of things, that, you know, so it's, I mean, it's like over listening into somebody in a, you know, coffee shop, really. That's what you're kind of observing. So it's quite nice, but it's really nice to see them supporting each other as well, and talking about, you know, taking a half an hour walk, or, you know, time out, you know, after a couple of hours study. So it's really good. So that's one. And go to the next one then, I think. And
I was going to say, you know, the conversations don't need to be super deep to be meaningful and like valuable to the learners. Because think about what you do with your, you know, if you're sitting in a classroom and you get up and you're walking out with your friend, what are the kinds of things that you're talking about? A lot of this stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is an example. This might go back to what you were talking about before in terms of, you know, some recommendations and keeping people motivated and excited.
Yeah.
I think this was also a poll, so students could respond back and say, let's see what's the next one. Oh, geez, there we go. Yeah, so sharing resources and helping get those in front of students. Did you see a lot of that?
That's it exactly. So and then so they were sharing resources, and then we were also putting in our own resources. So I'll give you one small example. We have Bloomberg in several different labs in Smurfit, and they can do a Bloomberg course. And normally that's us getting an email, and directing them to our website to say, this is how, here's the instructions, here's the code for logging on to and doing the Bloomberg Market course. So now we're just building a repository now of resources, so the students can just go straight in there. So that's another way of getting them in there and getting them into the network as well, and it being of value to them as well.
That's awesome. And we've also often heard that, even if you email these things out to students, they either don't see the email or they forget where it is. And so having this persistent place where you can get back to remind yourself about that resource can be really valuable.
It's going back to that idea. Look, students, the reality is they're not reading emails so it's bringing the technology that they're most familiar with and providing that to them and reducing those emails so that when they do get an email, they will read it because it's an unusual thing for them to get, as opposed to something they get 20 of them and they'll strategize in which one they'll read that day, And that is around students and reading emails. They scan them, they don't read them all, and they pick and choose what they think will be of value to them. So, and sometimes, stuff's lost because of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the distribution of websites. I mean, this is one of my irks because websites can be very, very hard, and none of them look the same, and you don't go to the same area. It's a bit like modules in LMSs. The academic puts the content where they think it's easy to find, but the students all have to learn how each academic thinks and where they, put the information. Websites are very much the same. The search on a website isn't as good. So building our resources within Inscribe means that, they'll just search a keyword and it comes up straight away and they can pick and choose which resource is for theirs, what they want to use.
Yeah.
So
really building that knowledge repository alongside that social engagement space. That's super important. And then this is, I think, a couple of fun examples of just maybe the silly side. We should have had the pool table,
as well.
Top date up here.
Yeah. So really odd because we get snow probably once every 3 years in Ireland. It's not that regular unless up on the mountains, maybe up in Donegal. So we just had a random day where a Monday morning where everybody got up to go to college, and it was like, oh, right, it's snowing today. It wasn't predicted. It was just something strange that happened. And so there was some fun conversations around that. Yeah.
And also, a good example of that the ability to have those real visual conversations that aren't just text-based.
Yeah. Exactly.
So now your students were not the only ones that were using the platform. So talk to us a little bit about the faculty experience. I know that can sometimes be a concern for institutions about, how faculty will think about this.
Yeah. So Pauline Grace, who is a lecturer in HRM, we had actually moved her to the Inscribe system on the advice and the feedback that we got from the academics in trimester 1 with our students who did not, the academics just did not like using the Brightspace discussion forum. They found it very, very clunky, really hard to respond back to individual students. So it wasn't user friendly. So we decided, right, let's try this out in the academic module. And the first person to use it was Pauline. And this was also her first time teaching online. So hers is quite a, discussion-based module, and it's very research-based as well. So, this is the feedback afterwards. It's probably best to read it out because it's pretty good. But the student contributions on Inscribe were outstanding. They seem to come from a place of honesty and reflection, perhaps two qualities that can emerge more naturally in asynchronous education. It's reassuring not to feel in competition with the shape of in-person teaching, but instead to allow the uniqueness of the new form generate to its own advantage. I think that says it all. And I think the
Wow.
feedback, the reflections were really good in it.
Yeah.
You know, these were students really made an effort, you know, and that was around everything and anything from, you know, bad interview maybe experience that they have, and or, you know, a company that they were working for and how promotions took place, you know, stuff like that. But it was really, really open, honest, and yeah, the students, then the feedback from students were that it was really interesting to hear how other companies work and how, you know, those reflections benefited them. Similar to a discussion in class, you know?
Yeah, right, right. Somebody shares their story, you learn from that. It makes you
Yeah.
feel more comfortable sharing your story. And did you do any surveys of the students as well as part of this?
We did, and I apologize, it's my bad. I didn't get to get some direct quotes because I had to reach out to the students, and they've all finished now. So
They're off on vacation now.
yeah, they're all somewhere hot, I hope. So not in Ireland. But the feedback was like, I can give a general because I've seen it and I have, it's just that I haven't got permission. The feedback was that it was much better, that the fact that it was integrated, it was seen to be better integrated than the discussion forums, which is funny if you think about it, because it's actually not it's not a native tool, let's say. But the other thing was that just it was easy to use, that there was you know, it was easy to respond to each other, to read other people's posts, and that the faculty members were very responsive as well. You know, so
Awesome.
the faculty member is able to use the tool and it's easy to use, so of course they're going to be in it a little bit more, you know.
Right, right. Even faculty prefer it over the discussion board, so that's always
Absolutely.
good to know.
Yeah.
We actually have a faculty specific question. So what kind of training or support did you provide faculty and staff to help them engage within the communities?
So that really happened at the instructional design. So the start of the design element of the online programs. So next year we will be widening it out to face-to-face staff members. And to be honest with you, since COVID, they kind of know how to create conversations and how to build communities and to ask the right questions within Brightspace, because they're already doing it since COVID. That was one very important feature that we drove home with them. But on the other side of it, like we didn't, like Jeannie met with Pauline for like a half an hour to use the system. We actually didn't show the other two academics how to use the system. They just used it. It's very like it is pretty much, you know, you log in, it's a familiar environment, you know, press respond and off you go, you know. It's
very intuitive, right?
Very intuitive. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Did that cover it, Danielle? Anything else you want us to touch on?
I think that covers it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, you started to talk a little bit about this, but as we wrap up, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's coming next?
Okay, so next up will be in our program staff. So we will have 3 other programs now coming on to the system for next term. So that will be face-to-face actually. One of them we've picked, it's a MAC, it's so Masters of Accounting. That's usually an 80% Irish cohort of students. So we're picking that just to see, right, well, what about these community of learners that maybe all live in close proximity, are all very similar to each other culturally, see how this network will work for them. Then we have another program, which is it's actually the program manager is responsible for the international students. So the onboarding of them and the insurance that they're getting on okay, and that they can check in and make sure visas are okay. So she's going to manage an international kind of community within here as well, and build loads of resources in there for her community. And then the final one is an MSc in management, which is the face-to-face one. So that's a totally different program manager, and that'll just be interesting to see, because that again has a 50-50 spread of international students and domestic students. Just see how they get on as well. So
I love testing
Yeah,
those different populations.
yeah, exactly. And I'm hoping by the nature of those program managers communicating with the other program managers that, you know, it's not an increase in work, it actually is a reduction of work, which I'm sure will happen, and that we will see more program managers asking to come onto it as well. And then, as I said, the digital ambassadors, so that will launch again now in September. So those new cohort of students coming in for the year will take part in, so we'll have about 30 of those again this year. And there's one other piece that's not there, and that will be we have a marketing development program, and those students really learn on the job. So they have about they kind of do a lot of work. It's half nearly internship, half marketing modules as well. So they're going to be involved in this project as well. So they'll use it as an additional tool to use. Yeah.
I'm also excited to see how these different populations use the tool maybe slightly differently or on a different cadence. So that research is going to be really, stay tuned. We'll get back together, 6 months from now and share some of those findings. Any last minute questions you would like us to take, Danielle?
We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Audrey, can you tell us a little bit about the implementation of your Inscribe community? How long did that take? What did that look like? What resources or support did you receive from Inscribe?
Yeah, so the community really was set up fairly quickly once we got over the GDPR, which is it's always a mountain that you have to climb here. It's always tough work. Anyway, once we got over that, the community was set up fairly quickly, and then our Brightspace administrator would have worked with the LTI to integrate it then into Brightspace. But that was fairly easy. There was no real issue with that. What was the other question? There's something else around technical integrate. Like the communities are set up really easy. And then I always forget the name. I'm really sorry. There's community and then there's the channels. Well, they're set up really easy as well. So it's like, I know I sound very salesy here, but there isn't really any difficulty in doing it. It's fairly quick, 10-15 minute job if you want to set a private channel and get students to connect to it. The biggest piece is really getting the communications out to students early on. And unfortunately with GDPR, it delayed us. So it meant that the tool wasn't available when the students started in September. And I think by October, they had already decided on different tools to use. And, that meant that we were, kind of a little bit on the back foot because of that. So I'm looking forward to really launching this earlier when the students are in orientation mode and us, having a lot of promotional screens about within the building, and then in our training that we give them, promoting it there as well. So that would be big. Yeah.
And then Katie, I guess the second part of that is we've heard the name Jeannie a couple of times.
Yeah.
So maybe you could explain who Jeannie is and what she does.
Yeah, so Jeannie is on our customer success team. So I will just say, I will say it and then Audrey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we always view every relationship as a true partnership. We have a lot of really good best practices and knowledge about community building and how to make it work. And so we want to make sure we're sharing those with the institutions that we're working with. So everyone has a customer success person assigned to them. You have the opportunity to meet with them as frequently as you want. So some people meet weekly, some people meet bi-weekly, but that individual's role is to help you with the design of the community, to think through the communication and launch of the community, and then to continue to meet afterward to look at what's going on in the space and to decide, is this what we expected? Is this what we should be seeing? Do we need to tweak anything to maybe achieve a different type of goal that we're looking for? So, and that relationship is indefinite. So as long as you're open to meeting with us, we want to continue to meet with you and help you think through the evolution of the spaces going forward.
Yeah.
And Jeannie, yes, Jeannie is famous. So anybody on the call who has worked with her knows that she's absolutely awesome and amazing.
It's great. Yeah, yeah. So we would have had weekly meetings, and that was really to check in and for us to have reassurance that we were doing things right, or she would say to us, actually, you know, you haven't reviewed, let's do that review again, because we were missing some things. And so she was able to highlight, you know, stuff that maybe we should have been checking or clearing and stuff like that. So it was good. And yeah, she really helped with the students as well, for them to vision right what they'd use it for and how they could begin conversations as well.
Wonderful. Awesome.
So I know this has not happened in your community at all, but inappropriate content or bad behavior, what's the process for flagging posts and bringing them to moderators' attention?
Yeah, that was one of the most fun parts actually initially of the job. So we had to put our Irish swear words into a big long box. So that was great fun trying to think of everything, you know, and with that was a real team competition, I can tell you. So yeah, so you know, and then the usual stuff, there's stuff often flagged that is unnecessary. So it's usually like, for example, you know, like one of the questions students were asked to reflect on very well organized or planned interview that they took part in, and then a bad interview process that they went through. And you know, there was obviously keywords coming up there, you know, about stressed or bad and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So you just go in, you have a quick run through the content. It's flagged by, is it Rosie?
Yes, Rosie,
Yeah, Rosie.
our technology assistant that flags things for you proactively.
Yeah, so we just go in then and clear them. And you kind of then knew, right, well, they're talking about interview skills here. So there's, yeah, or bad interviews. So it's fine. The words that are going to come up here are grand. It's not going to be anything big. So we haven't had any of that behavior. And again, that was something Jeannie said. She said it's like, you know, it's very few times anything has ever happened. And I was like, oh, wait till you see us Irish. But actually that didn't happen either. So that's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so there are some tools built into the system.
Yeah.
To, as Audrey pointed out, look for certain keywords or assess the emotion of the post. So if the emotion is quite negative, it can flag that. But as you said, I think we've had 2 instances in 6 years of somebody posting something that needed to be addressed right away. And that's, you know, over 800,000 students. So that's not bad.
Yeah.
All right, next question. How does your team measure the success of the communities and how is it impacting student success?
Do you want me? I'll take that, will I?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So at the moment we'll have the quantitative evidence of the community and how it's growing within the Inscribe analytics tool, where you'll get a good visual on kind of those communities. But we do also survey our students. So specifically in the MSc in management part-time, we ask those questions, and we always had, because these are usually a cohort of adult learners that are usually in the workplace, and they, you know, are coming in. They used to come in at weekends, now they're doing fully online. So we do have evidence, thankfully, going back to kind of identify how those students are onboarding, how they're communicating with each other, do they feel part of the Smurfit School, you know, community, etc. So we'll be able to look back on that through time and to see kind of more qualitative evidence of that. But for me, I think the important thing will be to watch it grow now over the years, and as we get those digital communities, those roles kind of working within the environment a little bit more, I think we'll be able to kind of really see it. So how those communities are coming alive or not. But I assume we will. Yeah,
we're optimistic.
Yeah, we are.
Danielle, anything
questions at this moment? Go ahead and close it.
All right. Well, that actually brings us to the end of our conversation today. So first of all, thank you so much, Audrey, for sticking around a little late today on your end, but also for sharing that amazing story and all the wonderful work that you guys are doing. We love partnering with you, and we're excited about all the work that's to come in the future. If anyone on the call is interested, please reach out to myself. You might also be hearing from Fred. He's likely to be the one sending the follow-up email with the recording. Some of you might hear from Aaron, who's not listed here, a new member of our team. But Love to hear from you. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So, if you're interested in something like Inscribe, or if you're just trying to build this and just want to have someone to talk to who really understands the space and can give you some advice, I'm always happy to have that conversation and to learn more about what you're doing as well. And with that, thank you all. Have an awesome rest of your Tuesday.